Going. Welcome, everyone, to the FinServ Podcast. I'm joined by somebody who I like to call my friend, Emily Bender. Emily, thanks for hopping on here with me today. And hopefully we're going to have a fun conversation, I think, talking salary and then maybe your concept about the was it lazy girl boss or something like that?
Yeah, it's good to see you, Jamie. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Where are you calling in from today? I know you were traveling.
Austin, Texas. Yep, back home.
Yeah. How's Austin been lately?
It's still 96, so stifling, but it's great. Austin's fun. Austin's popping. Summer is always it's insufferably hot, but you take the good with the bad. There's a lot of good too.
Yeah. Well, you share a love of similar music as I do, but anything new that's really caught your ear and attention lately, or what are you on right now?
No, there's no good music that's new. All I do is listen to old stuff. And I only like old movies. It has to be at least 10 years old. Sometimes TV can be good when it's new, but I'm half kidding.
Yeah.
I've been going down rabbit holes of older music. I've been doing a lot of 80s. I've been going back to like classic rock, and sometimes I go in a Van Halen phase. What about you?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to a lot of shows lately. So I'm actually going to Bruce Springsteen in about a week. I just got free tickets today for that. So that's pretty cool.
Oh,
Yeah. And then I'm going to Ocean's Calling at the end of September. And that has a lot of people, Bare Naked Ladies, I think Matchbox, a bunch of people there that are kind of 90s era music. So I'm looking forward to that. It's actually 3 days long. There's probably like 70 bands there, and it's on the beach. So it should be pretty cool. Dave Matthews is the end of the show. Who I've seen a bunch of times, but funny enough, I didn't start liking Dave till more like in the last 3 years. So I've never actually seen Dave when I liked the band. Like I didn't like him when I went previously. So
you kind of weren't allowed to like him too much. I always liked it. I remember Under the Table and Dreaming, 1994. He's a great musician. And it wasn't as much of you're not allowed to like it, like you can't like Nickelback. But I too have gotten to appreciate Dave more in my late 30s here.
Yeah, your older years. But what I realized was it was actually that I didn't like the guitar players who learned like 2 Dave songs in the 90s.
That's why.
Hold up. Yeah,
those guys were obnoxious.
Yeah, it was bad.
Okay, I hear you.
Yeah. So, well, anyways, we'll move out of that a bit. And, when we were talking before you coming on here, I said, what's a topic? And we landed on this, salary negotiation. There's a lot of FinServ fellows out there are either, in the first couple years of their work now, or still in college. We have a lot of those that will be listening. How do you negotiate, especially early on in your career? I think it's a little different, as you enter your later years of Emily world, right? Of how do you salary negotiate? But I think early on, it feels probably a very daunting task. You don't have experience with it. And ultimately, a lot of times, especially some of the people listening, don't even know anybody who to go to outside of like their school and some of the counselors there who have often not negotiated their own comp in a long time, right? Because it's a very different world inside of a university.
It's like the blind leading the blind. It's like going to a fat doctor and asking them how to lose weight, or a poor financial advisor. Yeah, a lot of the advice is from someone that hasn't really done it before. But Jamie, before I just start shooting my mouth off and telling people what to do, I should probably introduce myself a little bit, give some background. But I have 2 businesses. I started my own business when I was 30, Beetle Moment Marketing, which is a consultancy, all things marketing and branding, content. And then Wealth Voice is my startup. I started that in 2020. It's a SaaS marketing app, tech startup. Both of those are successful bootstrap businesses, which are in the black. So before that, I did have a corporate career for 10 years, and there was a lot of negotiation. We're always negotiating. If anybody listening is interested in negotiation, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. That's the handbook. He's an ex-FBI hostage negotiator. Fantastic book. Lots of great tips, whether you're an employee or you have your own business, it doesn't matter. We all negotiate basically every day. Getting your kids to eat their vegetables is a negotiation. Asking for more money is a negotiation. So let's see. When you're fresh out of college, you might have the Sally Field syndrome of they like me, they really like me. You're just excited to get a job. And the biggest mistake is to not negotiate. Do it when the offer's on the table. Don't wait. You can't say, well, in 6 months, once I get my foot in the door and they like me, then I can just do it at the beginning because that's the best time always. And I vividly remember when I was like 25 or 26, my good friend got hired at a company that is very famous in marketing and tech. They were acquired by Intel. You could maybe guess what brand this is. But she got the job there and she was just excited to get the job and she didn't negotiate at all. And I'm like, you should be making like 30% higher than what they offered you. And she just didn't want to rock the boat.
Mhm.
But that's a mistake. You should always ask for more. Ask for a little more than you're comfortable asking for because people are going to negotiate down from there. And then you might get what you really wanted or thought was appropriate.
Yeah, and I'll add, I think one thing from an employer perspective, right? I've been in a hiring role for 7 years now or so. I really expect every candidate I've ever made an offer to come back with some ask, right? So it is a little bit expected, so that the reason I tell people that is so that they actually don't feel that shame in asking for more, right? Just because it was competitive to get the job doesn't mean that you can't ask for something. Just because there's another good candidate. I have never seen, at least in my experience, where a reasonable ask came in and somebody just said, well, there was a second person that was right next to you and we're just going to go there instead. Like, I've never seen anybody do that, at least nobody you'd want to work for. I mean, somebody does that, you probably don't want to work there. And that's a good, that's a good outcome then, is you didn't end up there.
Sure. Business, the hiring process is the most like dating of anything that happens in business. All business has parallels to dating and romantic attraction, negotiation as well. But the hiring process is a dance. Do you like me? Do I like you? Are we going to go out? Who's going to pay? Am I worth this? Think about it like you're going on a date and you want them to like you, but do you like them? Right? Maybe it's not the right job for you. So you always want to come from a place of having many options. So when you only have one option, that's when you get desperate and you make mistakes. You want to have a lot of burners on that stove, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's not just about salary too, Jamie. Like when you are negotiating comp packages for employees, people ask for other things. They want more time off. They want more flexibility. They want whatever 401k matching, maybe if it higher percentage, great, throw that in. Sometimes salary is not the most creative way to make a great package happen. It's just one route.
Yeah. And I would say some of those ones people are actually more able to make changes on too, or do things. If it's a smaller firm, reimbursement for education expenses or repayment of some student loans. There are some interesting things like that you can layer in there. That actually shows that you're like thoughtful and thinking out of the box and being creative. Some larger companies, things like PTO and that stuff might be graded in. There might not be a whole lot that HR is going to do there. So, but I do think getting creative. I've recently asked people to cover memberships for organizations that they're part of as part of it. Those are usually easier yeses than if they just said, hey, I want another $500 a year. You're like, why are you asking me for $500 a year? But they're like, hey, I'm part of this organization. I love them. The membership fee is like $500 a year. Will you just make sure you cover that? It's not like an additional pool against me. Some of those small things, I think asking about phones, computers, some of those things you might be feeling awkward about asking, like ask about like, what do they provide you? Because I've also known people that have gone to roles and said like, we had to go buy our own computer and like, new Macs are $2,000 and that's a big upfront expense for yourself.
Oh, I didn't realize that that would even be a conversation. I've never been hired and had to supply my own equipment, but that's right. With phone bills,
Hmm.
anything that you're using to do your job, you should ask for the employer to cover. And look, most of these people have deep pockets. It's not a big deal. Just be polite and give a use case of like, here's why I need it. Here's how it will help me be more efficient. Because your efficiency and productivity is the key factor that makes you have a good ROI for your employer. Everything kind of comes down to hourly because you're making X a year and you're working however many supposed hours a week. That's just the math of it. So if I can get more done for you as my boss in this amount of time, you'll make more money off of me.
Yeah. So I think you pointed out a kind of one of the big challenges, just like early on when you're going through the application process, you have to do this. Well, let's fast forward through that. You've been somewhere for a couple years. How do you start advocating and negotiating compensation as you start to progress through the early years of your career?
This is important, equally important to the, early negotiations. But 60% of women say they've never negotiated their salary and 72% quit their job instead. Now, that was a stat from CNBC. I talked about this with Brittany Castro in a video series that she and I did. If you search Emily Binder, Brittany Castro, YouTube, Jamie will put the link in the show notes. It's a YouTube 10-minute quickie. Why aren't we negotiating? Well, there's a lot of reasons. It's not that women aren't good at it. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes they think it's not worth rocking the boat because there have been bad outcomes in the past. But after you've been somewhere for a few years, it might be time to leave, A of all. Like, you don't want to stay anywhere and make things too stale. That's really a 20th century hangover. We don't stay at a job for 15 years. Changing jobs is a wonderful opportunity to increase your compensation if you do it correctly. You don't want to hop to another lily pad and make a lateral move just to move. Like, while you're doing that, also create moment to increase the take-home pay. Never tell anybody in an interview what you are making or used to make. That is a private number. In most states, it's illegal for them to ask, and it's irrelevant. You say, this is, don't even give the first number. But if you're pressed, I'm looking for this range. Who cares what you made at the last one? Maybe you were underpaid. A lot of people are. Shouldn't matter. So if you don't negotiate, you could leave up to $2 million on the table over the lifespan of your career when you combine all the 401k contributions and retirement savings and the opportunity cost of not having that extra income that you could have been investing. $2 million because it was a difficult conversation that you wanted to avoid.
Yeah. You brought up a topic, and I don't know the stat off the top of my head, but maybe you remember some of it, is when you look at people who stay at jobs a really long period of time versus those that hop, I think every like 5-ish years is the date, right? You see a significant increase in the compensation lifelong of people who move more often than stay actually at one company. Um, I guess dive into that a little bit. When do you think somebody should know that it's time actually to hop? Maybe you've gone through the negotiations at work, but when do you know that it's a time to hop to continue to increase your earnings?
From personal experience, I stayed at one of my jobs when I was in my 20s for about 4 years, maybe a little longer. And the entire last year and a half or two, I knew I needed to get out. It wasn't a good fit anymore. There's a lot of things that I just needed to grow and go somewhere different. It took me a while to find the next right job. Hunting for a job is a full-time job, and it's really hard to find the right one. Like, buckle up and don't get discouraged. But I think once you're no longer growing, or here's actually a good little hack. I had a friend tell me to do this in my 20s. She said, "You seem to be having a lot of bad days at company." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm miserable all the time, but maybe it's just in my head." She said, "Probably not. Why don't you every day when it's a bad one, put a black or a red X on the calendar so you really track this? Was this a good, neutral, or bad day? At the end of the month, if they were mostly bad, you got to get out. You're spending the majority of your life, the hours out of the day, you're sleeping, working, and the rest maybe like eating and taking a walk. Working is a big part of it, so it better be good. It has to be a good fit. You can't be drained or feeling underpaid. And it depends if you're money motivated. I mean, some people aren't. Some people care more about feeling appreciated, connected to community, like they're doing something that's good for the world. You have to figure out what motivates you and find a job where you're getting juice, you're getting that itch scratched of the thing that, makes you feel alive.
Yeah, that's a great point, because when you look at people's happiness, what motivates them at work, compensation is important. Like I don't ever want to minimize that, but for some people, right, you mentioned like recognition, awards, notoriety, it's actually more important to them, right? They get more happiness out of that than a 10% increase in their pay, and that's what motivates them to actually do more work. Or community, do you feel that the culture there is aligned with who you are? And that's actually more important than making 20% more. And so understanding that's hard when you get started in the workforce, and I do think it can change. For me, recognition, I think, was actually more important for me than compensation early in my career. Because like when it was me sharing an apartment with a friend in Philly and I was never home, like I didn't need that much money. Like, if I made 10% more, I would have spent my weeks the exactly same way and like done the exact same thing. So it didn't drive much of my motivation. But like recognition from people who I admired that I was like doing something meaningful, like that mattered to me. Like it mattered to me more than money. And I would probably turn down money to make sure that I was doing things that I felt appreciated in.
Mm-hmm. Yes, being appreciated and recognized is very important to some people. This, you just reminded me of Jim Rohn's The Law of Averages, the average of 5. You are the combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You're the average of the 5 people that you're around the most. Your boss, your coworkers, you probably spend more time with them than your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend or your friends, your family. You want to be around smart people who are positive and have a good attitude, who are yes and people, like solving problems, not, oh, we've never done it that way, but it won't work. No, you always want that mindset of abundance and possibilities, because it will impact you and your creativity. And when you're in your 20s, you're like a ball of clay. It's so important to be in the right environment. Do reputation enhancing work. And what you said about being encouraged or recognized, you want to have bosses or people who are senior to you who, and this is a really important distinction, they're not just a mentor, but they're a sponsor. Sponsorship is so much more valuable and impactful, especially if you're a woman, because women are much more likely to mentor each other than to sponsor each other. A sponsor is willing to put their name on the line and vouch for you so that you can get a promotion or take the next step. And men actually do this much more often than women. It's interesting. I think women, we've only had jobs for like one grandmother. It's very new for us. We're not used to this. It's only been a few generations, still kind of figuring it out, balancing everything, different ballgame. But I've done everything in my power, not just to mentor and like take someone to lunch or get them a present, but like put them in front of somebody that can help them and vouch for them, for a younger person. That's everything. Business is all about relationships.
Well, on that one, when you're negotiating compensation or salary, do you have like a preferred way you advise people to go about it? Do you put it in writing? Do you have a conversation first? Probably depends a bit, but what have you seen be most effective?
This is a formal meeting. So, like I said, I've been out of the corporate game for 7 years. So maybe things have changed. But what I would do is the minute you start working, start a Google Doc or a PowerPoint or whatever is your thing and track all of your accomplishments. Put down quantitative things that you have achieved. And you're tracking 2 things. I made you money or I saved you money. That's what businesses care about. This is business. It is not kumbaya. It's not, I am a good team player. I have a smile on my face. I smell good. I made you money or I saved you money. Here are examples from the entire past year and put them in dollars, percentages, growth, quantify it. Then you set a meeting with your supervisor, manager, whatever, and you present it like a deck. It's a business case. There's nothing to sweat about or be nervous. And it's, here's the money I made you and saved you. Here's where my comp is. Based on these numbers, here's where I feel I should be. Can we do that? What do you think? And maybe grab comps, like go to Glassdoor. What's the going rate in my zip code for what I'm doing? I used to do that too. You just have to make a case for yourself and don't come in there entitled. And I've been here a year and there's inflation, so I deserve a raise. Show them that you made them money or saved them money. That'll work.
Yeah. I think that's great advice, and just the mindset about how you approach that, entitlement to raises from a company or boss perspective don't go very far, right? Like that's not how people are thinking about the bottom line. Like nobody's entitled to anything, right? That's how it works. Are you adding value? And to your point, is it you're generating more revenue or decreasing expenses by the work you're doing? Like those are the two levers that most companies have. And there in some areas there might be other things, reducing risk for a firm, but most of the people listening here are going into the financial services and advisory world, and the reality is either you're helping with generating new clients, new business, retaining business, or you're not. And if you're not in that avenue, it's going to be harder for you to show the value of what you're doing. And, somebody told me once before, and I forget the origin of this one's always, I forget who the original one was, but it was like, you want to be in this business as close as possible to where money exchanges hands. And I thought that was a really interesting, kind of conversation, because, where is money moving? And if you're closer to that, you can have a bigger impact on it. Likelihood you're making more money long term.
Yeah, be close to where the money changes hands.
Yeah.
And I also think with networking, this probably has changed because post-COVID world, I don't know, but I did a lot of that in my 20s, and that's a good time to do it because you're going to get older, you're going to get tired, you can get more introverted. Go take all those coffees and lunches, even if it's like, what's the agenda? This guy just wants to go out with me. That could be a phone call. You have to suss that out, especially as a young woman. But the network is really important. Build the network. Like, even if it's painful and you're an introvert, I'm an introvert. It doesn't mean that you're shy. It just means you don't get juice off of small talk. And that's what networking oftentimes is. So find a couple of questions that are big talk. What's the most interesting thing that happened to you this week? What are you working on? What are you excited about? How did you get here? Stuff like that.
Yeah. The figuring out what you're going to add, that, like you said before, that's like dating, right? I haven't dated in a really long time, so I'd be terrible advice on this, but like I would think about like interesting questions I wanted to like have conversations with before I went out with somebody. And I would actually go so far as to like make a list. Now, like I wouldn't like pull out a list, but I would be like, okay, like I'm like somewhat going to be prepared, that like if I need to ask questions and this doesn't just start flowing like immediately, that I'm like somewhat prepared to make an actual meaningful conversation here. So I think that's good advice.
Esther Perel, she wrote Mating in Captivity. She's a brilliant relationship psychologist, I believe. She has this list of questions, and I think it's a card game. It's like a deck of cards. They're for romantic partners to ask each other to get to know each other better, but you could do this in business too. And one of them was fill in the blank. After this happened, I was never the same. You could ask somebody that at a networking event in a professional sense. Like, after this happened, you were never the same at work. Or you can get an interesting answer. People want to connect. They don't want to talk about the weather.
Okay, answer that one in a business sense, Emily. Go ahead. You threw it out there. After what? You were never the same in business.
After I doubled my salary in a single move, because I realized the power of negotiation.
That's great.
And the quantifying of like everything I just shared with you guys, it's from my own career. It worked for me. You learn it over time. Like, they don't teach you this in school, sadly. But listen to podcasts, listen to someone like Jamie, ask your mentors or your sponsors. There are these little hacks in life and in the world that you pick up under the radar in between the lines. You can't like study them.
But what would you have answered if you weren't on a salary negotiation podcast chat?
Well, there with Wealth Voice, with my startup, I started it March of 2020, the weekend COVID hit, but really it started the July before that. And I had the idea, but I wasn't sure it would work. And I had never done a startup. And I'm like, how do I do this? I was talking to somebody, and it was a very pivotal moment because I said, I don't know. Do you think it would really work? And how do I find the guys to develop the code and all that? He's like, it will work. You just have to do it. It's a moonshot. Just take a chance. And he said the word moonshot, which that's thrown around a lot in the startup world, but somehow that clicked for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's just a big risk. It's a bet on myself. It's a bet on this idea.
Yeah.
That was a shift because I had done a business before that, but it wasn't a startup, so to speak. Like a tech app.
Yeah.
It was a different thing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, the moonshot thing gets thrown around a lot, but I still like it. What I also like is referring to the sun as the nearest star. For whatever reason, I've really been into that lately. I like the term morning star, right? Which we have a company in our space, morning star, which is the rising sun, right? And that's what it's supposed to be. That's what it's named after, is the sun rising in the morning, because the founder really liked sunrises, and thought that was really cool. But then I was looking at internet stuff about people tanning, but it's I've got skin exposure to the nearest star. And I was like, that's actually kind of cool. I like that variation better.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay. I know we're going to try to keep this pretty close here. Last one is it's a little tied to this, but I thought maybe you can take a couple minutes. Is that the lazy girl boss idea, or phenomena that you are aware of and talk about? So can you give us a little, what is that? And why do you think it's so important for young individuals to kind of understand this concept?
This is a woman that I found on TikTok, and she's gone viral. Her name is Gabrielle Judge, and she's the anti-work girl boss, or lazy girl work boss. You'll find her, just look it up. She was working in tech. She got really burnt out at her job. She had a concussion. She was completely overworked. It was just all these things started happening, health problems. And this woman's, I think, under 25 years old, maybe about 25. And so the idea is to stop thinking of your job as your identity and be clear what you want out of it, and shift to working smarter, not harder. Another thing that she pointed out was there's a lot about traditional work where culturally you're expected to take on more responsibility, more tasks, and that's considered good for you, or it's a compliment. They want me to do more. They must trust me. I must be doing a great job. You're not getting paid anymore. If I hire a lawyer and I pay them an hourly rate, and I said, can you throw in this extra deposition and check it, my terms of service, redo all that, just throw it in. I'm not going to pay you more for it. There's no way they would. No, that's another $400 hour, whatever. So we do that in the corporate world all the time. And her whole thing, this is a very Gen Z new philosophy. I would encourage people, keep an open mind, read about it, check it out.
Yeah.
But it's your life is not about just work. And in America, US, we are super obsessed with, look at the Europeans. All the memes about their away message. They're out of office for the summer. I'll see you in September. Don't call. We're I'm on my deathbed. If you do need to reach me, here's my cell phone.
Yeah. Well, I do think I think that's one of the most appealing things about the advisory space, and being an advisor with your own book of business, though, too, is you get to drive that, right? Your revenue is yours. And, if you want to make more money, you know exactly how to. And, I think that is what's brought a lot of appeal to that. There's downsides of that, setup too, but there's a lot of appeal to that for people looking at that as part of their career. So, yeah. I know you said this before we started recording, but it's kind of the funny opposite side of it is from a business owner standpoint. I mean, that's the opposite is what a business owner is trying to accomplish, right? So there is this, probably healthy conflict that should be occurring in those situations, in the sense of businesses and business owners are trying to buy efficiency and get the most out of their people all the time, while paying them, what is hopefully a fair wage, but not overpaying people either, right? So you're always going to have this, can I get more out of something without increasing costs?
Of course. And I don't blame anybody for that. This is capitalism. You just have to be aware of it. If
Yeah.
you're an employee, like, understand the game. There's also so many ways to do side hustles with AI. I mean, you could be making money in your sleep more so than ever before. I'm not saying do that. I'm not saying life is about hustling and milking every dollar out of every minute that you can. Then that will make you go crazy too. Like productivity hacks, morning routine. It's too much. That's not for me. You don't have to do everything the way that people instruct you, like productivity and biohacking and this obsessive milking everything, like sucking the marrow out of every bone. There's also something to be said for sitting quietly and doing nothing. And you can get a lot of good ideas if you just sit there. That's what meditation is.
Well, I do want to be mindful of time, and we flew through this very quickly, but thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to ask you one more question before we go. Sometimes I mix them up, but the one that I would like to know from you today is if you could go back over, any point in time in your career, is there a company you wish you would have started at some point during that time that you didn't? Looking back now. Did you have an idea of something that you said, you know what, I should have done that. I thought about it once, but I never really did it.
Yeah. Everything I look at in the podcasting space, I have felt the tools were okay, not great for a really long time. They've gotten better and better. But a few years ago, I thought about, and I actually went down the road for like 6 months with a couple of business partners about launching an app that would essentially do what Twitter later came out with, which was like audio tweets, audiogram memos. When you make audiograms, you can make them automatically. But I wanted to do this like 4 years ago, and I don't know if it would have been a big hit. But businesses that solve problems are always the most successful. You have to find the problem that already exists. Podcasting, there's a lot. Everyone has a podcast. Most people don't share them correctly. Most people are leaving a lot on the table because they have to do buffalo marketing. This is my thing, buffalo marketing. Go to buffalo marketing on emilybinder.com. Use everything just like the Native Americans use the entire buffalo. I want to make an app that does the buffalo marketing of all content.
Yeah.
Automatically.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's very much needed still in this space. But yeah, the technology's gotten better, but it's still very disparate and spread out. And, I see a lot of that still occurring. But I appreciate you sharing that. Thanks for coming on, talking to everybody just about salary negotiations, sharing your experiences. Congrats on your success too, and having two successful companies you've bootstrapped up and really have a big impact with. And I know you do a lot of things out there. So I really appreciate you taking some time and joining us here today.
You're most welcome. It's my pleasure, Jamie.
All right. And thanks everybody else. Hopefully I'll see you some point here, soon, and check out the next episode after this. I know Dr. David Roney will be back for that one. And so excited to have him back on the show here shortly.